What would you do if someone offered you $10,000 just for one kiss? Not a date. Not a promise. Just one kiss, with a complete stranger. Most people would laugh and walk away. But Diane Harper wasn't most people. Diane was a 23-year-old woman holding the weight of the world on her shoulders. 2 jobs, a little sister to raise, and a pile of bills that never stopped growing. She didn't have the luxury of laughing at $10,000. So when a woman in a red dress placed that envelope on the table and called it a simple dare, Diane said yes. She had no idea she had just kissed the most dangerous man in the entire city. And she had absolutely no idea that one reckless kiss was about to change her life forever. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to this channel, a place where love doesn't come easy, where hearts are broken before they're healed, and where every story will leave you feeling something real. I'm your narrator, and today's story is one of my absolute favorites, because it begins with the most desperate act of survival, and ends with something neither of our characters ever expected. Before we continue, I have a question for you in the comments. Can love really grow from something as reckless as a dare made for money? Tell me what you think below, and your comment might appear in the next video. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. The Fatal Kiss. Open Book Chapter 1. The Weight She Carried. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. like it always did, cold, indifferent, and merciless. Diane Harper pulled herself out of bed the way someone drowning pulls themselves to the surface. Slowly, painfully, with every muscle in her body screaming to stay down. She didn't have time to be tired. She never had time to be tired. In the small, worn kitchen of their apartment, she stood over the stove, flipping pancakes with one hand and mentally calculating overdue bills with the other. Rent. 3 months behind. Sadie's school enrollment. The dentist quote she'd been avoiding opening for a week. Then her little sister walked in, still in her school uniform, hair messy and eyes heavy with sleep, and just like that, Diane forgot about every bill on the table. Di, you always work so hard. When are you going to rest? Diane smiled the smile she'd practiced for 2 years, the one that said everything is fine when nothing was. When you grow up and become that famous doctor you always talk about, then I'll rest. But then Sadie looked down at her plate and said something in a voice so small it broke the room in half. The girls at school said my teeth look like a rabbit's. They laughed at me. Something shifted in Diane's chest, not just sadness. Something fiercer. More protective. The kind of emotion that makes ordinary people capable of extraordinary things. She took Sadie's face in her hands and made her a promise she had no idea how she was going to keep. We are going to fix that, sweetheart. I promise you. But chart the numbers that broke her. After Sadie left for school, Diane stood alone at the kitchen table and looked at the brutal math of her life. Rent overdue, $4,500. Sadie's school, $2,100. Dental treatment, $3,800. Total, $10,400. An amount that might as well have been $1 million to a woman working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. She put the papers down and went to get ready for her evening shift. A charity ball. Rich people. Expensive champagne. Good tips, maybe. She had no idea it would be the night that changed everything. Crescent Moon, the ballroom, where it all begins. The grand ballroom of the Harrington Hotel was a world Diane only entered through the service entrance. Crystal chandeliers. Designer gowns. Men in custom tuxedos who probably spent more on one suit than she made in 6 months. She kept her head down. Smiled politely. Refilled champagne glasses with practiced efficiency. That's when she saw him. Standing alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the glittering city skyline, a man in a black tuxedo who seemed completely separate from the noise and sparkle around him. There was something about his stillness that felt like a warning. Diane felt his gaze for exactly 1 second as she passed. And then she kept walking. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know what he was. Across the ballroom, however, a woman in a red dress had already noticed both of them. Large red circle, Catherine's revenge. Catherine Voss was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, all sharp edges hidden behind a polished surface. She had been humiliated exactly 1 week ago. At an event just like this one, She had approached Ravi greedy in front of a dozen witnesses and offered herself to him with her most seductive smile. His response had been delivered in a voice loud enough for every person in the room to hear. "Catherine, you are not worth my time. And you never will be. Stop offering yourself like this. It's pathetic, and it's starting to embarrass all of us." The silence that followed was the worst sound she had ever heard, followed by the barely suppressed laughter of people who were supposed to be her friends. Catherine had spent 7 days planning her revenge, and that exhausted little waitress carrying the champagne tray had just become the perfect weapon. Money bag the offer. "You, waitress. What's your name?" Diane turned to find Catherine watching her with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Diane, can I get you something?" "Actually, Diane, I have a very interesting proposition." Catherine placed a thick envelope on Diane's tray. The air between them felt suddenly charged, electric. $10,000 in cash. For one very simple thing. Diane's heart rate spiked immediately, because $10,000 was not just money. It was Sadie's teeth. It was the overdue rent. It was 3 months without fear. "See that man over there? The one by the window, in the black tuxedo? I want you to go over there and kiss him. On the lips. In front of everyone." Diane blinked. Surely she had misheard. "Why?" "Because it's fun. And because I pay well for fun." Diane felt the wrongness of the situation like a cold hand on the back of her neck. But then she thought of Sadie saying the girls laughed at me in that small, crushed voice. And she made a decision that would change her life forever. Kiss marked the kiss that started everything. Each step toward Ravi Greedy felt like walking toward something enormous and inevitable. She told herself it was just a kiss. Strangers kissed for bets all the time. She would touch his lips for 1 second, collect her money, and go home to her sister. She had no idea. "Excuse me." He turned. And the moment those dark eyes locked onto hers, Diane's brain produced one coherent thought: he is the most terrifying human being I have ever seen. "Yes," he said. One word. The voice of a man who owned rooms simply by standing in them. Diane had a fraction of a second to remember Sadie's face. And then she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The entire ballroom froze. Diane pulled back immediately, her face burning. "Sorry. I'm so sorry. I really need to." A hand closed around her wrist. Firm. Absolute. Inescapable. "You're not going anywhere." His voice was cold enough to make her blood run to ice. "Who do you think you are, to touch me without permission?" "It was a dare. That woman paid me. I didn't know, I swear, I just needed the money for my sister." He looked at her for a long, terrible moment. Then he looked at Catherine. And something shifted in his expression, something dark and calculating and furious, but not entirely directed at Diane. "What is your name?" "Diane. Diane Harper." "Well, Diane Harper," he said, quiet as a blade, "you just made a fatal mistake. Nobody touches me without permission. And now, you're going to pay for it." Police cars' revolving light the truth, and the collapse. As security escorted her toward the exit, one of the guards leaned in with a laugh that chilled her to the bone. "Forget the money, girl. You just signed your death sentence. You kissed Ravi Greedy, the mob boss of this city. He doesn't forgive anyone." The words hit her like a physical blow. Mob boss. She had kissed the mob boss of the city. For money she wasn't even going to receive. And now a man who was known for never forgiving anyone knew her name. Sadie would be left alone. Back inside the ballroom, Ravi held Catherine by the arm, controlled, cold, terrifyingly calm. "You used an innocent girl to get to me." "She's not so innocent if she accepted money to kiss a stranger," Catherine said, fighting to keep her composure. "She's desperate," Ravi replied in a voice so low it was almost a whisper. "And you knew exactly that. Get out of my sight." After she left, Ravi stood alone by the windows where he had been standing when a trembling young waitress had kissed him out of pure desperation. His brother Ezra appeared at his side. "Boss. What do you want to do about her?" Ravi was quiet for a long moment. Long enough for Ezra to notice. Find out everything about Diane Harper. Family. Work. Debts. Everything. By tomorrow morning. Are you going to punish her? A pause. Something complicated moved behind Ravi's eyes. She was trembling, he said quietly. But she still did it. I want to know why. Speech balloon engagement prompt, end of part. And so, beautiful souls, the first chapter ends, not with the explosion we all expected, but with something far more dangerous. Curiosity. Ravi Greedy, a man who forgives no one, is asking questions instead of ordering punishment. And Diane Harper is home, crying in her best friend's arms, convinced she has destroyed the only life she and her sister have. Neither of them has any idea what is about to happen next. Comment below, do you think Ravi is going to punish her, or protect her? Tell me what you feel. Open Book Chapter 2, The Investigation, the Money, and the Dinner. Diane didn't sleep that night. She lay on her old mattress staring at the cracked ceiling of the apartment and listened to the city breathe outside her window, wondering if somewhere across town, a man with cold dark eyes was making plans for her. Nancy had stayed until 5 in the morning, alternating between telling her it was going to be fine and holding her while she cried. When the sun finally rose, Diane got up and made pancakes for Sadie. Because some things had to be normal. Sadie couldn't know. Sadie couldn't carry this. You look tired, Di. Just a bad night's sleep, sweetie. Eat up, the bus doesn't wait. After the door closed, Diane stood in the empty kitchen and wondered whether to go to work or stay barricaded inside. She chose the shower. If she was going to die, she was at least going to die clean. File dividers on the other side of town. Ravi reads her file. Ezra had worked through the night. The dossier he placed on Ravi's desk the next morning was the most complete profile he had ever assembled in less than 12 hours. Birth certificate, employment records, academic transcripts, every debt, every payment, every late notice. Ravi read in silence. Diane Harper. 23 years old. Parents killed in a highway accident 2 years ago. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. She had been in her second year of nursing school when the call came. By the following week, she had withdrawn from her program and become the legal guardian of an 8-year-old child. Ravi's jaw tightened. He kept reading. 2 jobs. A full scholarship she'd finally claimed last year, studying nursing at night after double shifts. A sister named Sadie who was being bullied at school over crooked teeth that needed $3,800 of dental work. 3 months of overdue rent. A school enrollment fee. A dentist quote. Total, $10,400. Catherine had offered $10,000. The number landed in Ravi's chest like a stone dropped into still water. She needed the money, he said aloud. Not an accusation. Not even a judgment. Just the truth, spoken into the quiet office. It wasn't disrespect. It was desperation. Ezra raised his eyebrows. So you're going to forgive her? Ravi was quiet for a moment. He was looking at her photo, a student ID image, slightly overexposed, in which Diane Harper was smiling shyly at the camera with absolutely no idea her photo would one day end up in a mob boss's dossier. No, Ravi said. Then he opened his desk drawer and counted out $15,000 into a white envelope. Take this to her. Boss. Tell her it's payment for the inconvenience I caused last night. And tell her I want to have dinner with her tonight. Ezra stared at him for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. You're getting soft. I'm getting even. There's a difference. Now go. Open door and knock at the door. When the knock came at 2 in the afternoon, Diane's heart stopped entirely. She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. A tall man in a black suit. Her hands turned to ice on the doorknob. Ezra Greedy. Ravi's brother. I'm just here to deliver something. I promise I mean no harm. She opened the door on the chain. Through the gap, she could see he looked enough like Ravi to be unmistakable. Same strong features, same dark eyes. But where Ravi's energy had felt like a thunderstorm, this man felt like rain. Lighter. Less terrifying. He held up a white envelope. $15,000. From Ravi. He found out about Sadie. About your parents. About everything. Diane stared at him, genuinely unable to process the words coming out of his mouth. He also lost his parents young, Ezra said gently. He raised his brothers alone. He understands what situation you're in. And there's one condition. What condition? Dinner. Tonight. He wants to hear your story from you, not from a file. Diane removed the chain with trembling hands and opened the envelope. $15,000. Perfectly organized. Real. She counted it twice just to be sure. And then, to her complete humiliation, she started to cry right there in the doorway in front of Ravi Greedy's brother. She couldn't help it. This money was Sadie's teeth. It was the overdue rent. It was the weight she had been carrying alone for 2 years, suddenly lifted. I'll go, she heard herself say, before her brain caught up. I'll have dinner with him. Place setting the dinner, 2 broken people at one table. At 7 o'clock sharp, a black car arrived in front of her building. Diane wore her best dress, simple, a little worn at the hem, completely out of place for wherever she was being taken. Her hands were sweating by the time the car stopped in front of a restaurant with valet parking and an entrance that probably had a waiting list of 3 months. Ravi was already there, sitting alone at a private table in a candlelit room with a view of the entire city, a glass of expensive whiskey in his hand, watching the door. When he stood as she approached, she felt her heart betray her completely. Diane, he said. Deep voice. Quiet room. Thank you for coming. Didn't seem like I had much of a choice, she said, and immediately flinched. Sorry. I say things without thinking when I'm nervous. Something happened to his face then. Something unexpected. The severe lines around his mouth softened almost imperceptibly, and the ghost of a genuine smile crossed his expression. Sit. I don't bite, at least not without prior warning. The dinner began with the last topic Diane expected. Tell me about your parents. She blinked. Then, somehow, she told him. The highway. The truck. The phone call at midnight. Dropping out of nursing school the following week because there was no one else. A year of just surviving, 2 jobs, a traumatized child, grief she had no time to feel. And Ravi listened. Not politely, the way people pretend to listen. He actually listened, his eyes on her face the entire time, his expression shifting in ways that told her every word was landing somewhere real. When she finished, the silence between them was full rather than empty. I lost my parents at 18, he said quietly. They were murdered. Territorial dispute. Wrong place, wrong time. Diane felt the air leave her lungs. Ezra was 12. Liam was 8. And suddenly I was responsible for 2 children and my father's entire criminal organization. With no manual and no one to ask for help. She looked at him differently in that moment. She didn't want to. But she did. You understand, she said softly. You actually understand. Every second of it, he confirmed. And then, almost to himself, she was trembling when she kissed me. But she still did it. Do you know how rare that is, someone being terrified of me and still choosing to move forward anyway? The question hung in the air between them. Diane didn't have an answer. But she felt something shift, something fragile and real, like a door opening somewhere it had been locked for a very long time. Handshake the agreement. By the time dessert arrived, the conversation had moved through stories about Sadie and then about Ezra and Liam, and then somehow to the strange ways grief reshapes people. And Diane found herself thinking that this was the first time in 2 years she had talked about herself without feeling like she was burdening someone. Let me get to know you, Diane, Ravi said as the evening wound down. Properly. No dossier. No dares. Just 2 people who understand more about each other than most people ever will. I don't know your world, she said honestly. And I need to protect Sadie above everything. Slow, he agreed. And the word in his mouth was a promise, not a concession. We go slow. She got home at midnight to find Nancy pacing the apartment in a full panic. Are you alive? Did he threaten you? Do I need to call someone? He was. Diane paused, searching for the right word. He was different, Nance. He's complicated and dangerous, and I don't fully understand what's happening. But he was different than I expected. Nancy looked at her for a long moment. Then she pulled her into a hug and held on tight. You're the bravest and most idiotic person I have ever met. Diane laughed. For the first time in what felt like months, she genuinely laughed. Sun with Rays hashed the week that changed everything. The next morning, Diane paid 3 months of overdue rent. She enrolled Sadie in the full-day school program for the next 6 months. She called the dental office and scheduled Sadie's first appointment. When Sadie heard the news at breakfast, her face lit up like the sun coming out from behind clouds. Really? We're really going to fix my teeth? Really, sweetheart? Diane held it together until Sadie left for school. Then she sat at the kitchen table and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes of quiet tears, the kind you cry when something unbearable has finally stopped. In the days that followed, messages from Ravi started arriving on her phone. Not grand declarations. Small things. How was Sadie's first day of full-day school? And I drove past a cafe that reminded me of something you said. I don't know why I'm telling you this, and at midnight once, simply, are you still awake? She always wrote back. Camera with flash Catherine strikes again. Peace, however, never lasts. And Catherine Voss had spent the week watching her revenge plan backfire in the most spectacular possible way, because instead of Ravi destroying Diane, he appeared to be actively choosing her company. So Catherine hired a photographer. Within days, she had photos of Ravi and Diane talking at the entrance of Diane's building. Photos of them laughing in a park. A photo of Ravi holding her hand as they crossed a busy street, a gesture so small and instinctive that neither of them had probably even noticed it. Catherine leaked everything to the tabloids. The headline was designed to wound as efficiently as possible. Mob boss's new toy. Ravi Greedy's waitress conquest. Diane was mid-shift at the restaurant when Nancy came running with her phone screen extended, face pale. The article called her disposable. A temporary distraction. A conquest he hadn't discarded yet. Diane's phone started ringing with unknown numbers. Messages from strangers calling her a gold digger. A social climber. A fool. She turned it off with shaking hands and tried to hold herself together until the end of her shift. On the other side of the city, in his office on the 40th floor, Ravi read the same headline, and something in him went completely, dangerously still. Beautiful souls, stay with me. Because what happens next is where this story becomes something you will remember. Ravi Greedy is furious. Not at Diane, at the world that keeps trying to hurt her. And Diane Harper, who has spent 2 years surviving alone, is about to discover something she thought she no longer had time for. The beginning of trust. The beginning of something real. Comment below. At this point in the story, are you rooting for them? Has Ravi surprised you? Tell me everything. And do not go anywhere. Part 3 is where everything changes forever. The storm, the truth, and the choice. Ravi appeared at Diane's door that evening without warning. She opened it to find him standing in the hallway in a dark coat, his expression controlled in that precise way she was beginning to recognize as dangerous. Behind him, 2 of his men waited at a respectful distance. I saw the article, he said without preamble. I know. I'm fine. You're not fine. And this is my fault. She stepped back to let him in. He entered her small apartment the way a man like him always entered spaces not built for him, filling every corner just by existing in them. He looked at the kitchen table still covered in her nursing textbooks. The crayon drawings Sadie had left on the refrigerator. The stack of bills she hadn't finished dealing with. His jaw tightened. Catherine did this because of me. She targeted you because of me. And now strangers are calling you names because of me. Ravi. I should never have let you become visible before I dealt with her. Diane looked at him, this enormous, frightening, unexpectedly careful man standing in her tiny apartment surrounded by her sister's crayon drawings, and felt something crack open in her chest. I'm not fragile, she said quietly. I've been surviving this city without protection for 2 years. I can handle one tabloid. He looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. "I know you can," he said. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" A beat of silence that felt enormous. "The point is that you shouldn't have to." Girl Sadie meets Ravi. The sound of a key in the lock announced Sadie's arrival home from school before Diane could respond to anything. The door opened and Sadie walked in with her backpack half hanging off one shoulder, and then stopped completely when she saw a very large stranger in her kitchen. The silence lasted approximately 3 seconds. "Who are you?" Sadie asked with the unfiltered directness of a 10-year-old who had not yet learned to be afraid of powerful men. Ravi blinked. Something about the question clearly caught him off guard, possibly because very few people asked him that without at least a trace of fear. "My name is Ravi. I'm a friend of your sister's." "Are you her boyfriend?" "Sadie," Diane said, her face burning. "What? I'm just asking." Ravi crouched down to Sadie's level, and this, Diane realized later, was the moment she understood something fundamental about who this man really was underneath everything he had built around himself. He didn't dismiss the child. He addressed her. "Not yet," he said seriously. "But I'm working on it." Sadie considered this with the gravity of a philosopher. "Okay," she finally said. "Do you want a juice box?" Ravi Greedy, mob boss, looked at the juice box being extended toward him by a 10-year-old with crooked teeth and honest eyes, and he said yes. Crossed swords Ravi deals with Catherine. 3 days later, Catherine Voss received a visit from Ezra. There was no drama. No threats. No raised voices. That was what made it so frightening. Ezra simply explained, quietly, politely, with a particular calm of someone who has nothing to prove, that the photography agency Catherine had hired would be filing for bankruptcy by the end of the week. That the tabloid that had published the article had received a call from its largest advertiser. That Catherine's invitation list to every significant social event in the city was being quietly reviewed. "My brother," Ezra said pleasantly as he stood to leave, "has asked me to pass along one message." He placed a single note on the table and walked out without looking back. Catherine unfolded it with trembling hands. Inside, in Ravi's handwriting, were 4 words. "Don't come back around." She never did. Red heart the confession. It happened 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening so ordinary it seemed impossible that something so significant could take place in it. Diane and Ravi were sitting on the small balcony of her apartment, cups of tea going cold between them, the city quiet below. Sadie was asleep inside. It was late. Neither of them had made any move to leave or end the conversation. "I never expected this," Diane said finally. She wasn't talking about anything specific. She was talking about all of it: the money, the dinner, the texts, the evenings, the strange and completely unexpected reality that had grown out of one desperate kiss. "Neither did I," Ravi said. "You terrified me. You still terrify me, a little." "Good. It means you're paying attention." She laughed. He watched her laugh the way people watch things they don't want to lose. "I'm serious, Ravi. I don't know what this is. I don't know how it works, someone like you and someone like me." "Someone like me," he repeated quietly. "You mean someone dangerous?" "Someone who's been alone for a long time," she said. "And who doesn't know how to trust people anymore." The silence that followed was the softest silence they had shared. "Diane," he said finally, "I have spent 5 years surrounded by people who need something from me. My money, my protection, my name." And then a waitress who didn't even know my name kissed me out of pure desperation, and looked at me afterward like I was a person, not a weapon. He paused. "I'm not asking you to trust my world. I'm asking you to trust me. Those are different things." Diane looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand over his. "Okay," she said. "Slowly." "Slowly," he agreed. And in the quiet of that small balcony, above the noise of a city that had no idea, 2 broken people chose each other. Sunrise epilogue, 6 months later. Sadie's teeth were fixed on a Thursday afternoon in April. She walked out of the dental office with a smile so wide it was practically luminous, and proceeded to beam that smile at every single person she passed on the street, including 2 strangers and a very bewildered delivery driver. Diane watched her sister glow and felt a warmth in her chest so complete it was almost unbearable. Ravi was waiting for them outside. He had insisted on driving. Sadie ran to him immediately and grabbed his arm and said, "Look. Look at my teeth. Aren't they perfect?" Ravi looked down at her with an expression that had never appeared on his face in any business meeting, any negotiation, any confrontation in his life. Something unguarded. Something real. "Perfect," he agreed. He looked up and found Diane watching him. She was smiling, the real smile, not the practiced one. The one she had almost forgotten she had. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For being someone worth kissing." He stared at her. Then the corner of his mouth lifted, a proper smile, rare as rainfall in a drought, and completely devastating. "Now," he said, "that is a much better reason than $10,000. And above the city that had tried so many times to crush her, Diane Harper laughed freely, and this time, she wasn't afraid of anything at all. Megaphone outro. Subscribe and follow. Sparkles before you go sparkles. Beautiful souls, you just stayed for the entire journey. And I am so grateful that you did. If this story moved something in you, if you found yourself holding your breath during the kiss, or silently cheering during the dinner, or tearing up when Sadie smiled, then this channel is exactly where you belong. We tell stories here. Not perfect stories. Not easy ones. Stories about people who are exhausted and afraid and still choosing to love, because that is the most courageous thing a human being can do. If that speaks to you, hit subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a chapter. And leave me a comment. Tell me which moment hit you the hardest. Tell me if you cried. Tell me if you saw yourself in Diane, or in Ravi, or in Sadie looking at the world with open, trusting eyes. Every comment means more than you know. Every subscriber is someone who chose to sit down and feel something, and that matters. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is surviving right now and doesn't know if it gets better. Tell them, it does. Glowing star, the life lesson of this story. What this story really taught us. Diane Harper kissed a dangerous stranger for $10,000 not because she was reckless, but because she was a human being carrying more than any person should have to carry alone. And Ravi Greedy didn't forgive her. He recognized her. Because buried beneath his power and his reputation and the walls he had built around himself was someone who had once stood in the same desperate place, alone, responsible, terrified, and refusing to give up. This story teaches us that connection, real connection, doesn't grow in easy soil. It grows in the shared language of people who have known what it is to lose everything and keep going anyway. It teaches us that desperation is not weakness. Sometimes it is the most honest thing about a person. It teaches us that love, when it is real, does not demand that you become someone new. It finds you exactly where you are, exhausted, imperfect, showing up anyway, and it says, "You shouldn't have to do this alone. And you don't have to anymore. Take care of the people who depend on you. Keep your promises, even the ones that cost you everything. And stay open, because sometimes, the thing that changes your life forever arrives in the most impossible disguise."